David Martinez stood on the front porch of his new house and smiled. The moving truck had just left and boxes were stacked everywhere inside. But he could not help feeling happy. After months of looking at houses, he and his wife Sarah had finally found the perfect place. Willowbrook Estates was everything they had dreamed of. The houses were big and beautiful. Each one had a neat front yard with green grass and colorful flowers. The streets were clean and quiet. Children rode their bikes on the sidewalks while their parents watched from porches. Neighbors waved to each other when they got their mail. David walked to the mailbox at the end of his driveway. The mailbox was painted white with black numbers. Even the mailboxes in this neighborhood looked perfect. As he opened it to check for any mail from the previous owners, a woman walking her dog stopped to talk. "You must be the new neighbors," she said with a warm smile. "I'm Jennifer from the house with the red door." "Welcome to Willowbrook." "Thank you," David said. "I'm David and my wife Sarah is inside somewhere under all those boxes." Jennifer laughed. "Moving day is always crazy, but you picked a great neighborhood. Everyone here is very friendly. We have block parties in the summer and holiday decorating contests in December." David felt even better about their choice. "That sounds wonderful. We're looking forward to being part of the community." After Jennifer left, David went back inside. Sarah was in the kitchen unpacking dishes and putting them in the cabinets. Her long dark hair was pulled back and she had dirt smudges on her cheek from cleaning. "How's it going in here?" David asked. "Good," Sarah said. "I found the coffee maker so we can have coffee tomorrow morning." "That's the most important thing," David laughed. Sarah loved her coffee. She needed it every morning before going to work. Sarah worked for the government, but she could not talk much about her job. David knew it was something important and sometimes dangerous. He worked as a computer programmer and could work from home, which made things easier for both of them. "I met one of our neighbors," David said. "She seems really nice. I think we're going to like it here." Sarah looked out the kitchen window at the backyard. There was a wooden fence around it and a small garden area. "It does seem peaceful," she said. "After living in the city for so long, this will be a nice change." The next few days were busy with unpacking and getting settled. David set up his computer in the spare bedroom that would be his office. Sarah organized their bedroom and the living room. They went to the store to buy things they needed for the new house. Every day, David noticed how clean and organized everything was in Willowbrook Estates. The grass was always cut. There were no weeds in the flower beds. No trash was ever left on the streets. Even the fire hydrants were painted bright red and looked new. On Thursday morning, David found a letter in their mailbox. It was from the Homeowners Association, or HOA. The letter welcomed them to the neighborhood and included a thick book of rules. David sat at the kitchen table and read through some of the rules while drinking his coffee. There were rules about what color you could paint your house, rules about what kind of mailbox you could have, rules about when you could put your trash cans out and when you had to bring them back in, rules about parking cars and driveways, rules about how tall your grass could be. "There are a lot of rules," David said to Sarah when she came downstairs. Sarah poured herself coffee and looked at the book. "Wow, this is thick. But I guess that's how they keep everything looking so nice." "Listen to this one," David said. "Garage doors must remain closed except when entering or leaving." And this one, "No recreational vehicles, boats, or trailers may be parked in driveways or visible from the street." "Those seem reasonable," Sarah said. "We don't have any of those things anyway." David kept reading. "Lawn ornaments are limited to 2 per front yard and must be in good taste. Holiday decorations may only be displayed 30 days before the holiday and must be removed within 1 week after." "At least we can decorate for Christmas," Sarah said with a smile. The first weekend in their new house was quiet and peaceful. David worked in the yard, pulling weeds and watering the flowers that were already planted. Sarah organized the garage and washed their cars in the driveway. On Saturday evening, they decided to take a walk around the neighborhood to see more of it. The houses were all different styles, but they all looked expensive and well-maintained. Some had swimming pools in the backyard that they could see through gates. Others had beautiful gardens with stone pathways. They walked past a small park in the center of the neighborhood. There were swings and slides for children, and a few families were there enjoying the warm evening. An older man was walking his small dog on the path around the park. "Good evening," the man said as they passed. "You must be new here. I'm Robert, and this is my dog Buddy." "We're David and Sarah," David said. "We just moved in on Maple Street." Ah, the house with the blue shutters, Robert said. That's a beautiful house. The people who lived there before took very good care of it. We love it, Sarah said, petting Buddy. Everyone has been so welcoming. That's what makes this neighborhood special, Robert said. We all look out for each other. If you ever need anything, just ask. Most of us have been here for years. As they continued their walk, David and Sarah felt more confident about their decision to move to Willowbrook Estates. The neighborhood seemed like the perfect place to build their life together. When they got home, Sarah checked her work email while David made dinner. She had to travel sometimes for her job, but she tried not to let work stress follow her home. David understood that her job was demanding and sometimes required her to work odd hours or leave town suddenly. Everything okay? David asked as he chopped vegetables for a salad. Yes, just checking on a few things, Sarah said, closing her laptop. I'm all yours for the rest of the weekend. They ate dinner on their back patio, watching the sunset through the trees. The air was cool and fresh. They could hear birds singing and children playing in nearby yards. It was exactly the kind of peaceful evening they had hoped for when they decided to leave the busy city. Neither David nor Sarah could have known that their perfect neighborhood had a dark secret. Someone was watching them. Someone who thought he was in charge of keeping everyone in line. Someone who carried a gun and believed he had the power to enforce rules that didn't exist. But for now, as they sat together in their new backyard, David and Sarah Martinez were simply two people happy to have found their dream home in what seemed like the perfect neighborhood. Marcus Webb sat in his black SUV at the end of Oakwood Drive, watching the neighborhood through dark sunglasses. The vehicle looked like a police car with its extra lights on top and official-looking decals on the sides. But Marcus was not a police officer. He was a 45-year-old man who had lost his job as a security guard 6 months ago and had too much time on his hands. Marcus had lived in Willowbrook Estates for 3 years. During that time, he had convinced himself that the neighborhood needed someone to keep watch. He decided that someone should be him. Every morning at 8 o'clock, Marcus would start his patrol. He drove slowly through every street looking for problems. A trash can left out too long, a car parked the wrong way, grass that was too tall, a dog barking too much. Marcus saw problems everywhere. He had a notebook where he wrote down everything he saw. The notebook was full of license plate numbers, house addresses, and times when people broke what Marcus thought were rules. He believed he was protecting the neighborhood from criminals and rule breakers. Marcus wore a black uniform that looked like police clothes. He had a badge that said security on it, even though no one had hired him for security. On his belt, he carried a flashlight, handcuffs, and a gun. The gun was his most prized possession. He had bought it legally and had a permit to carry it. But carrying a gun did not make him a police officer. On Tuesday morning, Marcus was driving through the neighborhood when he saw something that made him angry. The new people on Maple Street had put their trash cans out on Monday night instead of Tuesday morning. This was against the HOA rules, and Marcus was not going to let it slide. He pulled into the driveway of the Martinez house and got out of his SUV. Marcus was a big man, over 6 feet tall and heavy. When he walked, his boots made loud sounds on the pavement. The gun on his hip was clearly visible. David was in his home office when he heard someone knocking loudly on the front door. He looked out the window and saw a man in a uniform standing on his porch. David thought it might be a police officer, so he quickly went to the door. "Can I help you?" David asked when he opened the door. "I'm Officer Webb with Neighborhood Security," Marcus said in a serious voice. "I need to talk to you about a violation." David was confused. "A violation? What kind of violation?" Marcus pulled out his notebook and flipped through the pages. "You put your trash cans out on Monday night. The rules clearly state that trash cans should not be placed at the curb until Tuesday morning." David looked past Marcus to see his trash cans sitting by the street. "I'm sorry, I didn't know the exact time. I thought putting them out the night before was okay." "Ignorance of the rules is not an excuse," Marcus said. He wrote something in his notebook. "This is your first warning. If it happens again, there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" David asked. Marcus put his hand on his gun. "Let's just say the HOA takes rule violations very seriously. I suggest you read your handbook more carefully." David felt uncomfortable. Something about this man seemed wrong. Real police officers were usually more professional and less threatening. "Can I see some identification?" David asked. Marcus pulled out a wallet and showed David a laminated card that said Willowbrook Security. The card looked like it was made on a home computer. "I don't have to show you anything else," Marcus said. "I'm the law in this neighborhood." After Marcus left, David called the HOA office number that was in their welcome packet. A woman named Mrs. Chen answered the phone. "Hello, this is David Martinez on Maple Street," David said. "I just had a visit from someone who said he was with neighborhood security. Is that something the HOA hired?" There was a long pause.
No, Mr. Martinez. The HOA has not hired any security company.
"Can you describe this person?" David described Marcus and his vehicle. Mrs. Chen sighed. "Oh no, that's Marcus Webb. He lives on Oakwood Drive. He's been doing this for months. We've told him to stop, but he won't listen. He's not employed by the HOA or anyone else." "He has a gun," David said. "We know. We've called the police about him before, but they said he hasn't broken any laws. He has a permit for the gun and he hasn't hurt anyone. They told us to call them if he actually threatened someone." David felt worried. "So he's just going to keep doing this?" "We're working on it," Mrs. Chen said. "In the meantime, you don't have to talk to him. You can tell him to leave your property. And please call us if he bothers you again." That evening, David told Sarah about his strange encounter with Marcus Webb. Sarah listened carefully, asking questions about what Marcus had said and done. "Did he actually threaten you?" Sarah asked. "Not directly," David said, "but he put his hand on his gun when he talked about consequences." It felt like a threat. Sarah's training kicked in. In her work, she had learned to spot potentially dangerous people. Someone who pretended to have authority they didn't have was a red flag. Someone who carried a gun while pretending to be in charge was an even bigger red flag. "We need to be careful with this guy," Sarah said. "People who think they're in charge when they're not can be unpredictable." The next day, Marcus was back on patrol. He drove by the Martinez house several times, checking to see if they had put their trash cans out at the right time. When he saw that they had followed the rules, he made a note in his book, but Marcus was not satisfied. He had decided that the new people needed to understand who was in charge in Willowbrook Estates. He had seen too many neighborhoods go bad because people didn't follow rules. He was not going to let that happen here. Marcus began to watch the Martinez house more closely. He wrote down when they left and when they came home. He wrote down what cars they drove and where they parked. He wrote down when their lights went on and off at night. Other neighbors had noticed Marcus's behavior too. Some were scared of him and stayed inside when they saw his SUV coming. Others tried to avoid him by doing things like mowing their grass early in the morning before he started his patrol. Robert, the man with the small dog that David and Sarah had met at the park, lived next door to Marcus. He had tried talking to Marcus about his behavior. "Marcus, people are getting worried about you driving around all the time," Robert had said. "Maybe you should find a hobby or get a job." "This is my job," Marcus had replied. "Someone has to keep this neighborhood safe. If I don't do it, who will?" Robert tried to explain that the neighborhood was already safe, but Marcus would not listen. Marcus believed that crime was always just around the corner, and only his constant vigilance was keeping everyone safe. As the days passed, Marcus became more convinced that the Martinez family was suspicious. The husband worked from home, which Marcus thought was strange. The wife left at odd hours and sometimes didn't come home until late at night. Their cars were always clean, which Marcus thought meant they were trying to hide something. Marcus decided he needed to investigate the Martinez family more closely. He started parking across the street from their house and watching through binoculars. He followed Sarah when she left the neighborhood, staying far enough behind that she wouldn't notice. In Marcus's mind, he was protecting Willowbrook Estates from dangerous outsiders. He believed that his gun and his uniform gave him the right to investigate anyone he thought was suspicious. He believed that the other neighbors looked up to him and counted on him to keep them safe. The truth was that most neighbors wished Marcus would stop his patrols and leave everyone alone. But nobody wanted to confront an angry man with a gun, so they hoped the problem would solve itself, not knowing that Marcus Webb was about to escalate his behavior in ways that would put everyone in danger. 3 weeks after moving to Willowbrook Estates, David and Sarah thought they were starting to settle into a routine. David worked from his home office, and Sarah continued her demanding job that sometimes required her to travel. They had no idea that Marcus Webb was watching their every move. On a Thursday morning, Sarah was running late for an important meeting. She quickly backed her car out of the driveway. but the back wheels ended up slightly on the grass strip between the sidewalk and the street. She didn't notice as she drove away. Marcus Webb noticed immediately. He was parked at the end of the street, drinking coffee from a thermos and watching the neighborhood through his binoculars. He saw Sarah's car tires on the grass and wrote it down in his notebook with the exact time. 7:23 a.m. At 8:15 a.m., Marcus drove to the Martinez house and knocked loudly on the front door. David answered, still in his pajamas and holding a cup of coffee. "We need to talk," Marcus said without saying hello. "Your wife damaged community property this morning." David was confused. "What are you talking about?" Marcus pointed toward the street. She drove on the grass strip. "That's city property, and it's also against HOA regulations to damage landscaping." David looked where Marcus was pointing. He could barely see 2 small tire marks in the grass. Those tiny marks? She was probably just in a hurry. "Intent doesn't matter," Marcus said, writing in his notebook. "Damage is damage. This is your second violation. One more and there will be serious consequences." "What consequences?" David asked. "You're not even a real security officer." Marcus's face turned red. He stepped closer to David and his hand moved toward his gun. "I am the law enforcement in this neighborhood. You would be wise to remember that." David felt his heart beating faster. He could see the gun on Marcus's belt clearly now. "I think you should leave," David said. "I'll leave when I'm finished," Marcus replied. "Tell your wife to be more careful. I'll be watching." After Marcus left, David immediately called Mrs. Chen at the HOA office again. "He's getting worse," David told her. "He threatened me again and he's watching our house." "I'm so sorry, Mr. Martinez," Mrs. Chen said. "We've sent him several letters telling him to stop, but he ignores them. We're considering legal action, but these things take time." "He has a gun," David said. "I'm worried he might hurt someone." "Have you called the police?" "Not yet. But I think I should." "Please do," Mrs. Chen said. "Maybe if enough people complain, they'll do something." David called the police and explained the situation. The officer who took the report said they would send someone to talk to Marcus. But there wasn't much else they could do unless Marcus actually broke the law. That afternoon, a police officer did visit Marcus Webb. The officer explained that Marcus had no authority to enforce HOA rules and asked him to stop bothering his neighbors. Marcus listened politely, but inside he was angry. He believed the police officer didn't understand how important his work was. After the officer left, Marcus decided he needed to step up his efforts to protect the neighborhood. The next morning, Marcus was waiting when Sarah came out to get her newspaper. He was standing beside his SUV, which was parked directly across from their driveway. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you," Marcus called out. Sarah looked at him but didn't walk over. Her training had taught her to be cautious around people who seemed unstable. "What do you need?" she called back. "You damaged city property yesterday morning," Marcus said loudly. "I need to see your driver's license and insurance information." "You're not a police officer," Sarah said calmly. "I don't have to show you anything." Marcus walked toward her. "I am authorized to investigate violations in this neighborhood. If you don't cooperate, I'll have to file a report." Sarah noticed that Marcus's hand was resting on his gun again. She also noticed that he seemed more agitated than David had described. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to stay on the sidewalk and not come onto my property." "Don't tell me what to do," Marcus said, his voice getting louder. "I have every right to be here." Sarah went back inside and locked the door. Through the window, she watched Marcus stand in front of their house for another 10 minutes before finally driving away. When David came downstairs, Sarah told him about the encounter. "This guy is escalating," she said. "People like him can be dangerous. Should we call the police again?" David asked. "Yes, but I don't think they'll do much until he actually commits a crime." Over the next few days, Marcus increased his surveillance of the Martinez house. He drove by every hour during the day. He parked across the street and watched through binoculars. He followed Sarah when she left the neighborhood, always staying several cars behind. On Sunday afternoon, David was washing his car in the driveway when Marcus pulled up and got out of his SUV. "You're using too much water," Marcus announced. "There are drought restrictions in this county." David looked at the small bucket of soapy water and the hose he was using to rinse the car. "I'm not using that much water." "I've been timing you," Marcus said, looking at his watch. "You've been out here for 23 minutes. The county regulations say car washing should be limited to 15 minutes. "Where does it say that?" David asked. Marcus pulled out a folder from his SUV and showed David a printout of county water regulations. The regulations did mention car washing, but they were about what days you could wash your car, not how long it could take. This doesn't say anything about a time limit, David said after reading it. It's implied, Marcus said. Efficient water use means not wasting time. David was getting frustrated. Look, I don't know what your problem is, but you need to stop harassing us. We haven't done anything wrong. I'll decide what's wrong in my neighborhood, Marcus said. His hand moved to his gun again. Maybe you should consider moving somewhere else if you don't like the rules here. That evening, David and Sarah had a serious conversation about Marcus Webb. Sarah's professional experience told her that Marcus was showing signs of escalating behavior that could become dangerous. He's getting more aggressive, Sarah said. And he's spending more time watching us specifically. Why do you think he's targeting us? David asked. Sometimes people like him focus on one person or family, Sarah explained. In his mind, we probably represent some kind of threat to his authority. Should we move? David asked. Sarah thought about it. We shouldn't have to move because of one person's behavior. But we need to be very careful. Don't engage with him anymore. If he approaches you, just go inside and call the police. The next morning, Marcus was parked outside their house again when Sarah left for work. This time he followed her all the way to the highway. Sarah noticed the black SUV behind her and took several turns to confirm she was being followed. When Sarah got to work, she told her supervisor about the situation. As an FBI agent, Sarah knew that being followed could compromise her safety and the safety of others she worked with. Do you think this person knows what you do for work? Her supervisor asked. No, Sarah said. I think he's just fixated on my husband and me for some reason. But if he keeps following me, it could become a problem. Let's monitor the situation, her supervisor said. Document everything and let me know if it gets worse. When Sarah got home that evening, David told her that Marcus had stopped by the house twice during the day. The first time he complained that their mailbox was 2 inches too far from the street. The second time he said their trash can lids weren't completely closed. He's looking for reasons to bother us, David said. It's like he's trying to find something to get us in trouble for. That night, Sarah and David noticed Marcus's SUV parked at the end of their street. The headlights were off, but they could see someone sitting inside. Marcus stayed there until almost midnight before finally driving away. He's watching us at night now, Sarah said. This is getting serious. Sarah made a decision. The next morning, she called the police again and filed a formal complaint about harassment and stalking. She also called Mrs. Chen at the HOA office. We need to do something about Marcus Webb immediately, Sarah told Mrs. Chen. His behavior is escalating, and someone is going to get hurt. We're trying, Mrs. Chen said. But legal action takes time, and he hasn't actually broken any laws yet. Following people and parking outside their house at night might be breaking laws, Sarah pointed out. You're right. Maybe the police will take this more seriously now. But Marcus Webb was also making his own plans. In his mind, the Martinez family had become the biggest threat to neighborhood security. He believed they were probably criminals who were planning something bad. He decided it was time to take direct action to protect Willowbrook Estates, not knowing that the quiet woman he had been harassing was trained to handle dangerous situations and had the authority to arrest him. Tuesday afternoon started like any other day for Sarah Martinez. She had finished an important meeting at work and stopped at the grocery store on her way home. The trunk of her car was full of bags containing food for the week, including ingredients for a special dinner she planned to cook for David that evening. As Sarah turned onto Maple Street, she immediately noticed Marcus Webb's black SUV parked directly in front of her driveway. The vehicle was positioned so that she could not pull into her own driveway. Marcus was standing beside the SUV wearing his fake uniform and dark sunglasses. His arms were crossed and he was staring at her car as she approached. Sarah slowed down and stopped in the street. She rolled down her window and called out, "Excuse me, could you please move your vehicle? I need to get into my driveway." Marcus walked toward her car with heavy steps. "You're blocking traffic by stopping in the street," he said in a loud voice. "That's a violation of traffic safety regulations." "I'm only stopped because you're blocking my driveway," Sarah replied calmly. She had learned in her FBI training to stay calm in tense situations and not to escalate conflicts. "I'm conducting an investigation," Marcus announced. There have been reports of suspicious activity in this neighborhood, and your household is a person of interest. Sarah knew this was completely false, but she didn't want to argue with Marcus in the middle of the street. "I'm going to park on the street and carry my groceries inside," she said. "Please move your vehicle when you're finished with whatever you're doing." Marcus moved closer to her car window. "I don't think you understand the seriousness of this situation. I need to inspect your vehicle and see some identification." "You have no authority to inspect my vehicle or demand identification," Sarah said firmly but politely. "I'm going to park now." Sarah drove past Marcus and parked on the street in front of her neighbor's house. As she got out of her car and opened the trunk to get her grocery bags, Marcus followed her. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stop what you're doing and come with me," Marcus said. He was now standing very close to Sarah, close enough that she could smell coffee on his breath and see sweat on his forehead. Sarah continued taking bags out of her trunk. "I'm not going anywhere with you. I'm going to take my groceries inside my house." "That's not going to happen," Marcus said. His voice was getting louder and more aggressive. "I have reason to believe you're involved in criminal activity, and I'm detaining you for questioning." Sarah turned to face Marcus directly. She could see that he was agitated and that his breathing was faster than normal. These were signs that someone might be about to do something dangerous. "Sir, you are not a police officer," Sarah said in her most professional voice. "You have no authority to detain anyone. I'm asking you politely to leave me alone and let me go into my house." "I am the law in this neighborhood," Marcus shouted. Several neighbors heard the yelling and came outside to see what was happening. "I decide who's suspicious and who's not." Marcus began walking in circles around Sarah, like a predator circling prey. "You and your husband have been acting suspicious since the day you moved here. Working from home, coming and going at odd hours, clean cars, always watching the neighborhood. I know your type." Sarah realized that Marcus had been watching them much more closely than she had thought. He knew details about their daily routines that meant he had been conducting surveillance for weeks. "What type is that?" Sarah asked, still keeping her voice calm. "Criminals," Marcus said. "Drug dealers, maybe. Or thieves checking out houses to rob. I've seen it before in other neighborhoods. But it's not going to happen in my neighborhood." By now 5 or 6 neighbors had come outside. They stood on their porches and in their yards watching the confrontation. Sarah could see that they looked worried and scared. Some had their phones in their hands, probably ready to call the police. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Sarah said. "My husband and I are law-abiding citizens. We haven't done anything wrong." "That's what they all say," Marcus replied. "But I've been watching you. I know you leave at strange times and come back late. I know your husband claims to work from home but never leaves the house. I know you keep your cars too clean, like you're trying to hide evidence." Sarah realized that Marcus had created an entire fantasy about her and David being criminals. In his mind, normal activities like working from home and keeping clean cars were evidence of criminal behavior. "Sir, you're mistaken about us," Sarah said. "But even if you had concerns, the proper thing to do would be to call the real police, not try to investigate yourself." "I am real police," Marcus shouted even louder. "I have more authority in this neighborhood than any city cop who doesn't live here." Marcus pulled out his notebook and waved it in the air. "I have documented every violation, every suspicious activity, every reason to believe you're a threat to this community." Sarah could see that Marcus was losing control of his emotions. His face was red, he was sweating more, and his hands were shaking slightly. These were all warning signs that someone might be about to become violent. "I'm going to go inside now," Sarah announced clearly, so the watching neighbors could hear. "Please do not follow me onto my property." As Sarah picked up her grocery bags and started walking toward her house, Marcus stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "You're not going anywhere until we get this sorted out," Marcus said. "I'm calling my contacts in law enforcement to come and investigate you properly." Marcus pulled out his cell phone, but Sarah could see that he wasn't actually dialing any numbers. He was just pretending to make a call to try to scare her. "This is Officer Webb," Marcus said into his phone, speaking loudly so everyone could hear. "I need backup at 1247 Maple Street. I have a suspicious individual who's refusing to cooperate with an investigation." Sarah knew that Marcus was completely fake calling, but she was more worried about what he might do next. People who pretended to have authority they didn't have could be very unpredictable when their authority was challenged. "Okay, I understand." Marcus continued his fake phone call. "Yes, I'll detain the suspect until you arrive." Marcus put his phone away and looked at Sarah with a satisfied expression. Backup is on the way. Real police officers who will know how to handle criminals like you. Sarah decided she had tried to be polite long enough. Sir, you need to get out of my way right now. You're blocking me from entering my own property, and that's against the law. I'm conducting a citizen's arrest, Marcus announced. You're suspected of criminal activity, and I'm detaining you until the proper authorities arrive. Marcus moved even closer to Sarah. She could now see the gun on his belt clearly. The weapon was in a black holster, and Marcus's right hand was resting very close to it. You have no authority to arrest anyone, Sarah said firmly. Move out of my way immediately. I have every authority. Marcus screamed. This is my neighborhood. I protect these people. I decide who belongs here and who doesn't. Sarah looked around at the neighbors who were watching. Some were recording the confrontation with their phones. Others looked like they wanted to help but were afraid of Marcus and his gun. The real police are already on their way, called out Jennifer, the neighbor with the red door who had welcomed them on their first day. I called them when I heard the yelling. Marcus spun around to look at Jennifer. You called them? I'm handling the situation. I don't need interference from outsiders. You're the outsider here, Marcus, called out Robert, the man with the small dog. These people haven't done anything wrong. You need to leave them alone. Marcus was now angry at everyone. His paranoia was expanding to include anyone who didn't support his actions. In his mind, the neighbors who were defending Sarah must also be part of some kind of conspiracy. All of you are in on this, Marcus said, turning back towards Sarah. You're all working together to bring crime into our neighborhood. That's when Marcus Webb made the decision that would change everything. His hand moved from resting near his gun to actually touching the handle. Sarah saw the movement immediately. Her FBI training kicked in as she realized that an unstable person with a weapon was about to become an immediate threat to her safety and the safety of everyone watching. Marcus Webb's hand tightened around the grip of his gun. The weapon was still in its holster, but Sarah could see his fingers moving on the handle. Her training as an FBI agent had taught her to recognize when a situation was about to turn deadly. Everyone needs to stay back, Marcus shouted to the neighbors who were watching. This woman is dangerous, and I'm going to handle this the way it needs to be handled. Sarah set her grocery bags down slowly on the sidewalk. She kept her movements calm and deliberate, not wanting to do anything that might make Marcus more agitated, but inside, she was preparing for what might happen next. Sir, please take your hand away from your weapon, Sarah said in a clear, professional voice. There's no need for anyone to get hurt here. Marcus laughed, but it was not a happy sound. You're finally taking this seriously. You should have cooperated from the beginning instead of acting like you're better than everyone else. I'm not acting like anything, Sarah replied. I just want to take my groceries inside and have a peaceful evening with my husband. Your husband, Marcus said with suspicion. Where is he? Why isn't he out here defending his wife? What kind of man hides inside while his woman is being questioned? Sarah knew that David was probably upstairs in his office with headphones on, working on a computer project. He had no idea what was happening outside. She was grateful for that because David might try to intervene, and that could make the situation more dangerous. He's working, Sarah said simply. Working on what? Marcus demanded. What kind of work does he really do? I've never seen any business vehicles at your house. No coworkers coming and going. It's suspicious. Marcus was now completely lost in his paranoid fantasies. In his mind, normal working from home was evidence of criminal activity. The fact that David and Sarah kept to themselves was proof they were hiding something. You know what I think? Marcus continued, his grip on the gun getting tighter. I think you two are drug dealers. That's why you have such nice cars and a big house but no visible jobs. That's why you're always so secretive about everything. Sarah realized that trying to reason with Marcus was pointless. He had created an entire false reality in his mind, and nothing she said was going to change his beliefs. Her focus now was on protecting herself and the neighbors who were watching. I think you're running drugs through this neighborhood, Marcus went on, using our quiet streets to conduct your illegal business. Well, I'm not going to let that happen. Marcus looked around at the neighbors. All of you should be thanking me for protecting you from these criminals. Instead, you're taking their side. That makes me wonder if some of you are involved too. Robert, the elderly man with the small dog, stepped forward slightly. Marcus, you're making a mistake. These are good people. They haven't done anything wrong. Stay back, Robert, Marcus shouted. Don't make me add you to the list of suspects. Sarah could see that Marcus was becoming more paranoid by the minute. People in this state of mind could be extremely unpredictable. They might see threats everywhere and react violently to anyone they perceived as an enemy. Where are the police? Jennifer whispered to another neighbor. They should be here soon, the neighbor whispered back. Marcus heard the whispering. Police? I told you I already called the real police. My contacts will be here soon and they'll know how to handle drug dealers and their accomplices. Sarah realized that Marcus actually believed his own lies about having contacts in law enforcement. In his fantasy world, he was an important person with special authority. This made him even more dangerous because he felt justified in whatever actions he might take. Sir, Sarah said, trying one more time to diffuse the situation peacefully. I understand you're concerned about neighborhood safety. That's admirable. But you're mistaken about my husband and me. We're just regular people trying to live quiet lives. Quiet lives? Marcus laughed again. Drug dealers always claim to want quiet lives. That's how they avoid detection. But I'm too smart for that. I've been watching you for weeks. I know all about your suspicious activities. Marcus began listing what he thought were criminal behaviors. Coming home late at night. Leaving early in the morning. Keeping your cars too clean. Never having visitors. Working from home with no visible business. It all adds up to drug dealing. Sarah was amazed by how Marcus had taken completely normal activities and twisted them into evidence of crime in his mind. But she was more concerned about the gun that he was still gripping. I'm going to search your car, Marcus announced suddenly. If you're not dealing drugs, you won't mind proving it. You cannot search my car, Sarah said firmly. You have no authority to search anything. I have every authority, Marcus screamed. I am the law enforcement in this neighborhood. Marcus took a step towards Sarah's car, and that's when everything changed. Sarah saw him start to pull the gun from its holster. Everyone get inside your houses right now, Sarah shouted to the neighbors. Her voice had changed completely from polite and calm to commanding and authoritative. Some of the neighbors immediately recognized the change in Sarah's tone and started moving toward their houses. But Marcus was focused only on Sarah. Don't you dare tell people what to do in my neighborhood, Marcus said, drawing his gun completely out of the holster. I'm in charge here. Sarah's training took over completely. She could see that Marcus was holding the gun incorrectly, with poor grip and stance. He obviously had not had professional firearms training. But even someone with poor training could hurt or kill people with a gun. Sir, put the weapon down immediately, Sarah commanded in her FBI voice. You are threatening innocent people with a deadly weapon. I'm not threatening anyone, Marcus said, but he was pointing the gun in Sarah's general direction. I'm protecting the neighborhood from criminals like you. Marcus looked around at the neighbors, some of whom were still outside watching in horror. All of you see this, right? You see how she's trying to take control? This proves she's a criminal. Good citizens don't try to give orders to law enforcement. But the neighbors could see what was really happening. They could see that Marcus was an unstable man with a gun threatening a woman who had done nothing wrong. They could see that he was the dangerous one, not Sarah. Marcus, put the gun away, Robert called out. This has gone too far. You stay out of this. Robert, Marcus replied without taking his eyes off. Sarah, unless you want to be arrested as an accomplice. Sarah knew that the situation had reached the point where someone was going to get seriously hurt if she didn't act. Marcus was holding a loaded weapon and was clearly not thinking rationally. He might shoot her, or the gun might go off accidentally and hit one of the neighbors. Last warning, Sarah said in her most authoritative voice. Put the weapon down now. I don't take orders from drug dealers, Marcus replied. You're under citizen's arrest for possession and distribution of illegal substances. If you resist, I'm authorized to use force. Marcus raised the gun higher, pointing it more directly at Sarah. Several neighbors screamed and ran toward their houses. Others dropped behind cars or trees for protection. That's when Sarah made her decision. She could not allow an armed, unstable person to continue threatening innocent people. It was time to end this situation before someone got killed. Marcus Webb, Sarah said in a voice that carried absolute authority. I am a federal agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You are pointing a weapon at a federal law enforcement officer. Put your weapon down immediately, or you will be arrested for assault on a federal agent. Marcus froze. For the first time since the confrontation began, he looked uncertain. What did you say? I said I'm FBI, Sarah repeated. And you're about to be in more trouble than you can possibly imagine. For a moment, complete silence fell over Maple Street. Marcus Webb stood frozen with his gun still pointed toward Sarah, his mouth hanging open in shock. The neighbors who were watching held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. You're lying, Marcus finally said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. You're just trying to scare me. Sarah reached slowly into her jacket pocket and pulled out her FBI credentials. She held them up so Marcus could see the badge and identification card clearly. Special Agent Sarah Martinez, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Badge number 2847. Marcus squinted at the credentials, but he was too far away to read them clearly. Those could be fake, he said, but he sounded less sure of himself. They're real, Sarah said calmly. And right now you are committing a federal crime by pointing a weapon at a federal agent. If you put the gun down immediately, we can discuss this situation peacefully. Marcus looked around at the neighbors, who were all staring at him with expressions of shock and fear. Some had their phones out and were recording everything. Others had already run inside their houses and were probably calling the police. This is a trick, Marcus said, but his hand holding the gun was starting to shake. You're trying to confuse me so you can escape. Marcus, Sarah said, using his first name to try to make a personal connection. Look around you. Look at your neighbors. They're terrified of you right now.
Is this really how you want to protect them?
Marcus did look around, and for the first time, he seemed to realize how his actions appeared to other people. His neighbors weren't looking at him like he was a hero protecting them. They were looking at him like he was a dangerous criminal threatening an innocent woman. I was just trying to keep the neighborhood safe, Marcus said, his voice getting smaller. I understand that, Sarah said, but pointing a gun at people is not keeping anyone safe. It's creating danger. Marcus's paranoia kicked in again. How do I know you're really FBI? You could have bought that badge online. Criminals do that all the time. Sarah knew she had to take control of the situation before Marcus's mental state deteriorated further. She had been trained for exactly this type of scenario, dealing with armed, unstable individuals who posed a threat to public safety. Marcus, I'm going to give you a choice, Sarah said in her most professional voice. You can put the weapon down right now and we can talk about this calmly. Or you can continue pointing that gun at a federal agent and face charges that will put you in prison for many years. You're bluffing, Marcus said, but he was clearly struggling with doubt. Assault on a federal agent with a deadly weapon is a federal crime, Sarah explained. It carries a minimum sentence of 10 years in federal prison. Is protecting your neighborhood worth spending 10 years of your life in a federal penitentiary? Marcus's hand was shaking more now. The gun was getting heavy, and his arm was getting tired from holding it up, but he was trapped by his own delusions. Admitting that Sarah was really an FBI agent would mean admitting that everything he had believed about her was wrong. If you're really FBI, prove it, Marcus said. Call your supervisor or something. I don't need to prove anything to you, Sarah replied. You're the one pointing a gun at a federal agent? The burden of proof is going to be on you to explain to a federal judge why you thought threatening an FBI agent was a good idea. Behind Marcus, Sarah could see police cars turning onto their street with their lights flashing but no sirens. The neighbors had called 911 and help was finally arriving. But Sarah knew she couldn't wait for the police to handle this. Marcus was too unstable and the situation was too dangerous. The police are here, Jennifer called out from her porch. Marcus, they're coming down the street right now. Marcus spun around to look at the approaching police cars, momentarily taking his attention off Sarah. That was the opportunity Sarah had been waiting for. Using her FBI training in hand-to-hand combat, Sarah moved quickly toward Marcus. Before he could react, she grabbed his wrist with both hands and twisted it in a way that forced him to drop the gun. The weapon fell to the sidewalk with a metallic clatter. Marcus tried to struggle, but Sarah had already moved behind him and applied a restraint hold that prevented him from moving. Within seconds, she had him face down on the ground with his arms behind his back. Stay down, Sarah commanded. Do not move. Marcus was shocked by how quickly everything had changed. One moment he was holding a gun and felt in control, and the next moment he was on the ground with a woman half his size completely restraining him. You can't do this to me, Marcus said, his voice muffled because his face was pressed against the sidewalk. I'm neighborhood security. You're under arrest, Sarah said. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The police cars pulled up just as Sarah was finishing reading Marcus his rights. 4 officers jumped out with their weapons drawn, not sure what they were walking into. "Federal agent," Sarah called out, holding up her credentials with one hand while keeping Marcus restrained with the other. "Suspect is secured." The police officers approached carefully. The senior officer, a sergeant named Williams, looked at Sarah's credentials and then at Marcus on the ground. "What happened here?" Sergeant Williams asked. "This individual threatened me with a deadly weapon," Sarah explained. "He's been harassing my husband and me for weeks, and today he escalated to armed confrontation." Sergeant Williams looked around at all the neighbors who were watching. "Did anyone else see what happened?" "We all saw it," Robert said, stepping forward. "Marcus pulled a gun on her. She tried to talk him down peacefully, but he wouldn't listen. He's been bothering everyone in the neighborhood for months," Jennifer added, pretending to be some kind of security officer. "We've all been afraid of him." The police officers handcuffed Marcus and helped him to his feet. He looked dazed and confused, like he couldn't understand how his day had gone so wrong. "This is all a mistake," Marcus said to the officers. "I was just trying to arrest a drug dealer. I have evidence." Sergeant Williams looked at Marcus with concern. "Sir, this woman is an FBI agent. She's not a drug dealer." "That's what she claims," Marcus said. "But I've been investigating her for weeks. I know she's involved in criminal activity." Sarah picked up Marcus's gun from the sidewalk and carefully checked to make sure the safety was on. "This weapon was pointed directly at me," she told Sergeant Williams. "I considered him an immediate threat to my safety and the safety of the neighbors." "You did the right thing," Sergeant Williams said. "We've actually been getting calls about this guy for weeks. People in the neighborhood have been complaining about his behavior." One of the other officers was searching Marcus's SUV. "Sergeant, you need to see this," the officer called out. Inside Marcus's vehicle, the police found notebooks full of detailed surveillance notes about various neighbors. There were photographs taken with a telephoto lens. There were maps of the neighborhood with houses marked in different colors. There were fake police documents and official-looking forms that Marcus had created on his computer. "This guy's been conducting surveillance on half the neighborhood," the officer reported. "He's got detailed notes about when people come and go, what cars they drive, even what they wear." Sarah looked at some of the notes about her and David. Marcus had been watching them much more closely than she had realized. He had recorded the times they left and returned home every day. He had noted what they wore, what they carried, and even what they talked about when they were in their front yard. "This is stalking behavior," Sarah told Sergeant Williams. "He's been conducting illegal surveillance on numerous residents." Sergeant Williams nodded. "We'll be charging him with multiple counts of stalking in addition to the assault with a deadly weapon." As the police put Marcus into the back of their patrol car, he looked out the window at Sarah with confusion and anger. Even now, being arrested, he still believed he had been in the right. "You're all making a mistake," Marcus called out through the car window. "I was protecting this neighborhood. Someone has to keep watch over these people." But the neighbors weren't looking at Marcus like he was their protector anymore. They were looking at him like what he really was, a dangerous man who had terrorized their community while pretending to help it. Sarah watched the police car drive away with Marcus inside. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe easily in her own neighborhood. After the police took Marcus Webb away, Sergeant Williams stayed behind to interview Sarah and the neighbors who had witnessed the confrontation. David finally came outside after hearing all the commotion, shocked to learn what had happened while he was working upstairs. "I can't believe this was going on and I had no idea," David said, putting his arm around Sarah. "If I had known he pulled a gun on you." "You did exactly what you should have done by staying inside," Sarah told him. Having more people involved would have made the situation more dangerous. Sergeant Williams took detailed statements from Sarah and several neighbors. As they talked, a disturbing picture emerged of Marcus Webb's behavior over the past several months. "He started small," Robert explained. "Just driving around the neighborhood slowly, watching everything. At first, people thought maybe the HOA had hired him for security." Jennifer nodded. "Then he started approaching people about minor things. Trash cans left out too long, cars parked slightly crooked, grass that was maybe a little too tall. We thought he was just overzealous about neighborhood rules." "When did his behavior become more aggressive?" Sergeant Williams asked. "About 2 months ago," said Mrs. Chen, who had driven over from the HOA office after hearing about the incident. "We started getting complaints about him claiming to have authority he didn't have. We sent him letters telling him to stop, but he ignored them. Sergeant Williams made notes as he listened. Did anyone ever call the police about him before today? Several neighbors looked embarrassed. We talked about it, Robert said. But he had a gun, and he seemed to know a lot about law enforcement procedures. We weren't sure if maybe he really did have some kind of authority. Plus, he never actually hurt anyone, Jennifer added. He was intimidating and annoying, but we thought maybe we were overreacting. Sarah understood their hesitation. People like Marcus can be very convincing. They use official-sounding language and wear uniforms to make themselves seem legitimate. It's a common tactic. David looked at his wife with new understanding. Is this something you deal with in your work? Sometimes, Sarah said. There are people who pretend to have authority they don't have for various reasons. Some do it for money, some for power, and some because they have mental health issues that make them believe they really are in charge. Sergeant Williams closed his notebook. Well, Mr. Webb is going to face serious charges. Assault with a deadly weapon on a federal agent is a federal crime. The stalking and harassment charges will be handled at the state level. What kind of punishment is he looking at? David asked. If convicted on all charges, he could face 10 to 15 years in prison, Sergeant Williams explained. The federal charges alone carry a mandatory minimum sentence. Over the next few days, more details about Marcus Webb emerged as police investigated his background. Detective Lisa Park, who was assigned to the case, visited Sarah and David to share what they had learned. Marcus Webb has a history of this type of behavior, Detective Park explained as they sat in the Martinez living room. He's lived in 4 different neighborhoods over the past 10 years and he's had problems in every one. What kind of problems? Sarah asked. Similar to what happened here. He would appoint himself as unofficial security, then gradually become more aggressive and paranoid. In his last neighborhood, he was banned from the community after threatening several families. David shook his head. Why didn't anyone warn us about him? The previous incidents were handled privately by homeowners associations or resolved when he moved away, Detective Park said. There's no central database for this type of behavior unless someone is actually arrested. Detective Park opened a file folder. We found some interesting things when we searched his house. He had detailed files on most of the families in this neighborhood, going back almost 2 years. 2 years? Sarah was surprised. But we've only lived here for a month. He was preparing, Detective Park explained. Marcus had photographs, license plate numbers, work schedules, and personal information about dozens of residents. He even had floor plans of some houses that he got from public records. The detective showed them copies of some of Marcus's surveillance notes. The level of detail was disturbing. He had recorded when people left for work, when they came home, what cars they drove, who visited them, and even what they talked about in their front yards. He had a whole rating system, Detective Park continued. Green meant good neighbor, yellow meant watch closely, and red meant suspicious activity. You two were marked as red. Why were we suspicious? David asked. Detective Park read from Marcus's notes. Subject works from home with no visible business. Wife leaves at irregular hours. Vehicles always clean. No social visitors observed. Conclusion, possible drug dealing operation. Sarah laughed, but not because it was funny. He thought we were drug dealers because David works from home and I have an unpredictable work schedule. In Marcus's mind, anything that didn't fit his idea of normal behavior was evidence of criminal activity, Detective Park explained. He had similar theories about other neighbors. The elderly man who walks his dog at night was marked as suspicious because night activities could be criminal surveillance. David was amazed by the twisted logic. So being a good neighbor who keeps his house nice and minds his own business makes you suspicious? To someone with Marcus's mindset, yes, Detective Park said. People with paranoid delusions often see threats where none exist. They interpret normal behavior as evidence of conspiracy or criminal activity. The detective showed them more of Marcus's files. He had created fake official documents, including a neighborhood security coordinator certificate and identification cards that looked like law enforcement credentials. Where did he get the gun? Sarah asked. He bought it legally, Detective Park said. He has a concealed carry permit. The gun store owner said Marcus claimed he needed it for his security job. The owner had no reason to doubt him. Is there any way to prevent people like Marcus from getting weapons? David asked. Detective Park sighed. Not under current laws. Marcus had no criminal record and no history of mental health treatment. On paper, he looked like a qualified gun owner. What about his behavior in previous neighborhoods? Sarah asked. Those were civil matters, not criminal charges, Detective Park explained. Restraining orders and HOA violations don't show up on background checks for gun purchases. Over the following weeks, more neighbors came forward with stories about Marcus Webb's behavior. Some had been too scared to complain before, but now they felt safe talking about their experiences. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow who lived alone, told police that Marcus had been entering her backyard without permission to check for security issues. He had told her that prowlers had been seen in the neighborhood and that he was protecting her. The Johnson family revealed that Marcus had been following their teenage daughter when she walked to the school bus stop. He claimed he was providing escort security for children in the neighborhood. A young couple with a new baby said Marcus had knocked on their door at midnight, claiming he had seen suspicious activity near their house. When they looked outside, there was nothing there. The scary thing is that some people were starting to believe him, Jennifer told Detective Park. He was so convincing when he talked about neighborhood security. Some residents were actually grateful that someone was keeping watch. That's how people like Marcus operate, Sarah explained to the group of neighbors who had gathered in the community center to discuss the incident. They identify real concerns that people have, like crime or property values, and then position themselves as the solution. But he was making us less safe. Not more safe, Robert pointed out. Exactly, Sarah said. Real security comes from professional law enforcement and neighbors looking out for each other in appropriate ways. It doesn't come from one person with a gun deciding who belongs in the neighborhood and who doesn't. The investigation also revealed that Marcus had been unemployed for 8 months, not 6 months as he had told some neighbors. He had been fired from his security guard job for inappropriate behavior toward customers. His former employer described him as someone who took his authority too seriously and often overreacted to minor situations. Marcus Webb represents a perfect storm of factors, Detective Park explained to the neighborhood group. Unemployment gave him too much time on his hands. Mental health issues made him paranoid and delusional. Access to weapons gave him the means to threaten people, and a community that was initially tolerant of his behavior gave him the opportunity to escalate. How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? Mrs. Chen asked. Education and communication, Sarah said. Real law enforcement officers carry proper identification and work for recognized agencies. Real security guards are hired by specific organizations and have clear, limited authority. Anyone claiming to be in charge of neighborhood security should be questioned and verified. And if someone is making you uncomfortable, don't wait to report it, Detective Park added. We'd rather investigate a false alarm than respond to a tragedy that could have been prevented. 6 months after the confrontation on Maple Street, Marcus Webb stood in federal court wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. The man who had once strutted around Willowbrook Estates in a fake uniform, carrying a gun and claiming to be the neighborhood's protector, now looked small and defeated. Sarah Martinez sat in the witness section, having testified earlier about the events that led to Marcus's arrest. Beside her, David held her hand as they waited for the judge to announce the sentence. The federal prosecutor had presented a strong case. Marcus was found guilty of assault on a federal officer with a deadly weapon, impersonating a law enforcement officer, stalking, and weapons violations. The evidence against him was overwhelming, including the surveillance photos and detailed notes he had kept about his neighbors. Mr. Webb, Judge Harrison said from the bench, you have been found guilty of serious crimes that threatened the safety and security of an entire community. Your actions were not those of a concerned neighbor trying to help. They were the actions of someone who used fear and intimidation to control others. Marcus's lawyer had tried to argue that his client was mentally ill and needed treatment, not prison. While the court acknowledged that Marcus had mental health issues, the judge made it clear that this did not excuse his criminal behavior. The court recognizes that you may have believed you were helping your community, Judge Harrison continued. However, your delusions do not justify threatening innocent people with a deadly weapon. Federal agents put their lives on the line to protect our communities. Threatening them with violence is a serious crime that demands serious consequences. Judge Harrison sentenced Marcus Webb to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. He would also be required to undergo mental health treatment and would be permanently banned from owning firearms. Additionally, the judge said, you are prohibited from entering Willowbrook Estates or contacting any of the residents there. This includes direct contact, indirect contact through third parties, and any form of surveillance or monitoring. Marcus showed no emotion as the sentence was read. His delusions had been so strong that even now, he seemed to believe he had been wrongly convicted for trying to protect his neighborhood. After the sentencing, Sarah and David met with Detective Park and the federal prosecutor outside the courthouse. "How do you feel about the sentence?" the prosecutor asked Sarah. "It's fair," Sarah said. 12 years is a long time, but Marcus proved that he was willing to use a weapon against innocent people. He needed to be stopped before someone got hurt. Detective Park nodded. The state charges for stalking and harassment will run concurrently with the federal sentence. He'll also have to pay restitution to the HOA for the security costs they incurred because of his behavior. "What about the mental health treatment?" David asked. "That's mandatory," the prosecutor explained. "Marcus will receive psychiatric care while in prison. If he's ever released, he'll have to continue treatment as a condition of his probation." "Do you think the treatment will help him?" David asked. Detective Park shrugged. "It's hard to say. Some people with paranoid delusions can be helped with medication and therapy. Others never fully recover. The important thing is that he won't be able to hurt anyone else for a very long time." Back in Willowbrook Estates, the neighborhood was slowly returning to normal. The residents had used the Marcus Webb incident as an opportunity to improve their community in positive ways. Mrs. Chen had organized a real neighborhood watch program, working with the local police department to train residents in proper procedures. Unlike Marcus's vigilante activities, the neighborhood watch followed legal guidelines and worked closely with law enforcement. "The difference is that we're working together as a community," Mrs. Chen explained at a neighborhood meeting. "We're not trying to replace the police or take the law into our own hands. We're just being good neighbors who look out for each other." The HOA had also implemented new security measures. They installed better lighting in common areas and created a system for verifying anyone who claimed to have official business in the neighborhood. "If someone claims to be working for the HOA or any other official organization, residents can call our office to verify," Mrs. Chen said. "We'll never send someone to your house without notifying you first." Sarah had become an unofficial expert on recognizing fake authority figures. She gave a presentation to the neighborhood about warning signs to watch for. "Real law enforcement officers carry proper identification from recognized agencies," Sarah explained. "They follow established procedures and can be verified through official channels. Anyone who gets angry when you ask for identification or tries to pressure you into immediate compliance should be questioned." "What about security guards?" someone asked. "Real security guards work for specific companies and have limited authority," Sarah said. "They can observe and report, but they cannot arrest people or search property. And they should never threaten residents or make people feel unsafe." The neighborhood also established better communication systems. Residents exchanged phone numbers and created a group text system for sharing information about actual security concerns. Robert, the elderly man who had tried to reason with Marcus, became the unofficial coordinator of the communication network. "If something seems wrong, we share information with each other and call the real police if necessary," he said. "But we don't take matters into our own hands." Jennifer started a monthly coffee gathering where neighbors could get to know each other better. "One of the reasons Marcus's behavior went on so long was that we didn't really know each other," she said. "If we're better friends and neighbors, it will be easier to spot when someone doesn't belong." David and Sarah had become more active in the community as well. David helped set up a website where neighbors could share information and communicate safely. Sarah occasionally spoke at community events about safety and security topics. "I never wanted my job to become part of our home life," Sarah told David. "But I'm glad I was able to use my training to protect our neighbors." "Do you think Marcus will try to come back when he gets out of prison?" David asked. "I doubt it," Sarah said. "By the time he's released, we'll probably have moved somewhere else anyway, and the restraining order will be in effect for the rest of his life." The incident had actually brought the neighborhood closer together. Families that had barely spoken before were now friends. Children played together while parents watched from their porches. The community garden that had been neglected for years was restored by volunteers. In a strange way, Marcus Webb did bring the neighborhood together, Jennifer said at one of the coffee gatherings, just not in the way he intended. A year after Marcus's sentencing, Willowbrook Estates received an award from the city for their community safety program. The mayor praised the residents for turning a negative, situation into an opportunity for positive change. This neighborhood shows how communities can work together with law enforcement to create real safety, the mayor said at the award ceremony. They didn't let one person's bad behavior destroy their sense of community. Instead, they used it as motivation to build something better. Sarah and David were among the residents recognized for their leadership in creating the new safety programs, but Sarah was more proud of how the neighborhood had learned to take care of itself in healthy, legal ways. Real community safety comes from neighbors who know and trust each other, Sarah said in her acceptance speech. It comes from working with professional law enforcement, not trying to replace them. And it comes from understanding that safety is everyone's responsibility, not just one person with a gun. As they walked home from the ceremony, David and Sarah reflected on how much their lives had changed since moving to Willowbrook Estates. Do you ever regret that we stayed here after everything that happened? David asked. Sarah looked around at the neighborhood they had helped transform. Children were riding bikes while their parents chatted on porches. The community garden was blooming with flowers and vegetables. Neighbors waved as they passed and everyone seemed relaxed and happy. No, Sarah said. This is what we wanted when we moved here. It just took a little work to get it. Marcus Webb had thought he was protecting the neighborhood, but he had actually been the biggest threat to its safety and peace. The real protectors turned out to be the neighbors themselves, working together with respect for law and each other. In the end, Willowbrook Estates became the safe, friendly community that Marcus had claimed to be defending. The difference was that they achieved it through cooperation and trust, not fear and intimidation. And Sarah Martinez, the quiet FBI agent who had moved there just wanting a peaceful place to live, had become the unlikely hero who showed them how to build the community they all deserved.